For 30 years, Johnny Carson was the definition of cool control. 5 nights a week, he sat behind his desk as the unflappable king of late night, a master of ceremonies who could handle any guest, any disaster, with a smooth joke and a confident smile. He projected an image of untouchable professionalism. But the moments that truly defined his reign weren't the perfectly landed jokes or the polished interviews. They were the shocking, unscripted instances of pure chaos, when the mask slipped and the carefully controlled environment of The Tonight Show completely fell apart. These are the 16 moments of genuine laughter, raw emotion, and unpredictable mayhem that revealed the real man behind the desk. It began as a straightforward demonstration. In April 1965, actor Ed Ames came on the show to demonstrate the tomahawk throwing skills he used on the series Daniel Boone. A wooden silhouette of a cowboy was brought out, and Ames took his shot. The throw was perfect, but the landing was hilariously wrong. The tomahawk landed squarely in the silhouette's crotch. The audience erupted, but it was Carson's reaction that made television history. He completely broke. For nearly 3 minutes, an eternity in live television, Johnny was doubled over, tears streaming down his face, completely unable to speak. When he finally gasped for air, he delivered the legendary line, "I didn't even know you were Jewish," cementing the moment as an all-time classic. While an accident could make Johnny laugh, a deliberate act of sabotage from a friend would take things to a whole new level. Don Rickles, while guest hosting, accidentally broke a wooden cigarette box on Carson's desk that Johnny treasured. Rickles knew he was in trouble, but he had no idea how Carson would retaliate. Months later, Johnny learned Rickles was filming his sitcom, CPO Sharky, on a nearby NBC soundstage. In a completely unprecedented move, Carson grabbed a camera crew, ran across the studio lot, and stormed onto Rickles' set in the middle of a live taping to confront him about the box. The surprise and chaos were legendary, proving that a feud with Carson could leave the studio and follow you to work. Carson was famously private and emotionally guarded. It took something truly powerful to break through his stoic demeanor, but when it happened, it was unforgettable. On his second-to-last show in 1992, Bette Midler announced she wanted to sing something special for him. As she performed a tender version of "One for My Baby" and "One More for the Road," the camera cut to Carson. Tears were welling in his eyes. The king of late night, the man who was always in control, was openly emotional as he said goodbye to 30 years of his life in front of millions. Sometimes, the chaos that broke Carson's composure wasn't emotional, but purely physical. Johnny frequently hosted animal experts, and those segments were always a roll of the dice. During one appearance, a capuchin monkey decided Carson's perfectly coiffed hair looked like a great place to play. It launched itself from its handler's arm directly onto Johnny's head, completely destroying his sacred hairstyle. Rather than panic, Carson just sat there with a look of deadpan resignation. A moment of pure comedy gold that proved his cool could withstand even the most bizarre interruptions. Carson had seen thousands of comedians, but few could genuinely surprise him like Steve Martin. Eschewing a normal interview, Martin announced he would perform a magic act as the Great Flydini. He then proceeded to pretend to unzip his pants and pull out a series of impossible objects: eggs, a ringing telephone, and finally, a tiny hand that waved to the audience. The routine was so bizarre, so committed, that the normally composed Carson once again lost it, genuinely caught off guard, and reduced to a helpless, laughing spectator. While Martin's chaos was contained in a single bit, some guests were a force of nature from the moment they sat down. Most understood the unspoken rule: Johnny leads, you follow. But Robin Williams simply couldn't be contained. The interview would dissolve within seconds as Williams launched into a storm of rapid-fire impressions, leaping from his chair and using Carson's desk as an impromptu stage. A producer later revealed they would be in a panic in the control room, but Johnny would just wave them off. He knew that with Robin, you just had to let go and enjoy the ride. Don Rickles was a unique threat to the order of The Tonight Show, and he loved to create tension. In 1976, he sat down next to the one man in Hollywood nobody dared to cross, Frank Sinatra. With Sinatra on the couch, Rickles launched into a brutal roast, calling the legendary chairman of the board overrated. A producer confirmed that Carson was genuinely nervous, knowing Sinatra's temper could erupt at any moment. To everyone's relief, Sinatra burst out laughing, but for a few tense minutes, nobody in America knew what was going to happen next. By today's standards, some of the show's most famous moments are stunningly inappropriate. In 1977, Dolly Parton appeared on the show, and the conversation turned to her famously voluptuous figure. Looking at her low-cut outfit, Carson remarked on air, "I'd give a year of my life to peek under that blouse." The audience gasped. Parton, a true professional, laughed it off. But the comment generated more viewer mail than almost any other in the show's history, with many calling it deeply disrespectful. It was a rare misstep for Carson, and a moment that exposed the rapidly changing cultural lines. Equally uncomfortable, but for different reasons, were the later appearances of comedy legend Bob Hope. By the 1980s, Hope would arrive with dated jokes read from cue cards, completely disconnected from the audience. Carson, a master of comedic timing, was forced to sit there and feign laughter, his smile growing tighter and tighter. A writer revealed that backstage, Johnny would express his frustration, but on camera, he always showed respect for the man who had paved the way for him, even as he watched the legend fade before his eyes. An even more unexpected moment of raw emotion came in 1981, when actor Jimmy Stewart read a poem he'd written about his dog, Bo, who had recently passed away. What began as a lighthearted tribute became a deeply moving meditation on love and loss. As Stewart finished, his voice cracking, the camera found Carson, once again visibly tearing up, momentarily speechless. He didn't rush to a commercial or crack a joke. He let the raw, human moment hang in the air, creating one of the most authentic scenes in television history. Carson had a much different reaction to a physical threat. When Joan Embury of the San Diego Zoo brought out a massive Burmese python, the segment took a terrifying turn. As she was talking, the snake began to slither off the desk and head directly toward Carson's leg. Johnny's suave persona vanished instantly. He leaped out of his chair with shocking speed, backing away with the look of genuine terror that sent the audience into hysterics. It was a hilarious reminder that beneath the polished host was a regular guy who really didn't want to be touched by a giant snake. Some guests saw the rigid format of The Tonight Show as a challenge to be broken. George Carlin, a comedian famous for battling censors, played a much more subtle game. During one monologue, he embedded a clever, unmistakable jab at NBC's content restrictions. It was so subtle that it flew over the censors' heads, but Carson caught it. He didn't say a word, but a quick, knowing smile to the camera told the audience he was in on the joke, silently siding with the comedian against his own network bosses. Dean Martin brought a different kind of unscripted energy to the show. He would lean so heavily into his famous drunk persona, slurring words, missing his chair, and losing his train of thought, that the audience felt anything could happen. Carson, the master straight man, would play along, feeding him lines and reacting to the apparent chaos. The brilliance of it was that nobody knew for sure how much was real and how much was an act, creating a captivating tension that made for incredible television. Don Rickles wasn't content just roasting guests. He wanted to go after the king himself. In a completely unprecedented move, Rickles began heckling Johnny from backstage during his sacred nightly monologue. Thrown off, Carson paused, then broke format entirely. "Don, get out here," he called, stopping the monologue cold to confront his tormentor. It was a moment of spontaneous chaos that showed Carson was willing to sacrifice his own routine for a moment of authentic, unpredictable entertainment. Sometimes a guest's sheer talent was enough to derail the show. During one appearance, a casual conversation with Sammy Davis Jr. about other entertainers suddenly turned into a masterclass. In less than a minute, Davis seamlessly morphed into Frank Sinatra, Jerry Lewis, and Jimmy Stewart, capturing their voices and mannerisms with stunning accuracy. Carson wasn't just hosting, he was a fan, clutching his stomach in genuine, helpless laughter at the sheer brilliance unfolding next to him. In the mid-'80s, Arnold Schwarzenegger, there to promote a film, decided to answer Carson's first question with a long, earnest response, entirely in German. Johnny had no idea it was coming, but instead of getting flustered, he leaned into the absurdity, nodding along and interjecting with his own nonsensical German-sounding words. It was a brilliant piece of improv from both men, and a perfect example of a guest going off script, only to have the host masterfully follow him into comedic chaos. In the end, it was these moments of chaos, not the perfectly written jokes, that cemented Johnny Carson's legacy. His true genius wasn't just in his performance, but in his reaction. When the script was thrown out, when the guests went rogue, and when real life invaded his perfect studio, he never panicked. He embraced the madness, and in doing so, created television that felt truly alive. He proved that the greatest moments aren't planned, they just happen. And for 30 years, he was the master of being there when they did.